Fantastic. Okay. Well, we've gotten a lot of information and some data this morning, and I have an opportunity to kind of follow up on some of the information that Bill was sharing, and you'll see that we'll be revisiting much of the data, but I'll have an opportunity to go a little bit deeper and share with you what that really looks like in application when you're in a school district and when you're working with the students. I am a superintendent, a proud superintendent of Lancaster School District, and you have information about my bio. But let me share with you a little bit about my district. I serve an elementary district. We have 15,000 students here in Southern California. We have students from pre-K, preschool, up through 8th grade. We have about 13% of those students that are receiving special education services. So when you see this number, it is consistent all the way down, not just at a national level, not just at a state level, but we see it very readily in our district. We serve a very diverse population in Lancaster. We're in the Antelope Valley, so we're in the far northeast in Los Angeles County. If you're ever driving by Magic Mountain and you see the 14 freeway, hook a left and you'll find us. After you go past some tumbleweeds and joshua trees, we are out there. But there's lots of affordable housing out there also. So as a result, we are, and Pace just did a recent study, I was proud to be a part of that, we are over the hill and sometimes considered out of sight. Because we have a significantly high number of foster youth in Antelope Valley. Of the foster population in all of Los Angeles County, the Antelope Valley has close to about 77% of the foster youth in all of Los Angeles County end up over the hill and in our little Antelope Valley. So you can imagine that that brings, not to say by any stretch of the imagination that all foster youth are special education students, but we know that that population brings with it some unique challenges. Lots of trauma, lots of mental health issues, which are some of the same things that many of our special education students are dealing with. With that, you saw the numbers there as far as where those disabilities lie and the eligibility percentages. I want to draw your attention specifically to learning disability and other health impairment. When we think about the issues of disproportionality, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that on the next slide, but when we think about that, a lot of our disproportionality concerns occur because of behavior issues. A lot of the concerns about how we manage and deal with kids that are acting out because of whatever reason deal with behavior issues and the ability to manage, to train, to respond as educators when students are responding in inappropriate manners. So when in the absence of these strategies, sometimes our students end up being categorized and put into special education categories. When you see the disability percentages and you start to think, are these numbers truly reflective of a belief that all children can and will learn? Are we doing everything that we can and should be doing to ensure their success? I share with my staff, and especially with my district staff and administrative staff, to go back and just kind of do a gut check and a reality check. If it was your child, when do you stop working? If it was your grandchild, when do you stop trying something, the willingness to try something new? How ready, if it were your child, how ready would you be to put the child in special education? If it were your child. I will share, I am a proud foster grandmother. My daughter and her husband chose to, God bless their little souls, they chose to be foster parents. And their first sibling or siblings, should I say, was a set of siblings, 5 of them, that were stair steps. Okay, no gas? Yeah, I gas. I will tell you, I said, okay, wait a minute. How many? You didn't say child, you said children. What does that mean? Give me a number. But it has been an interesting learning experience for me. They have since adopted all of the children, and we have a wonderful, wonderful addition to our family. But I will tell you that every day there are things that I learned because they are they look very much like the students that we serve, that I serve in our district. So when I talk about what our kids deserve, I think of my foster grandbabies, I think of my natural grandbabies, and I think of what I would want for them. What's good enough for them? What am I willing to settle for? How should we be responding, or how would I expect and hope for folks to be responding to our kids? We know that we have IDEA in place, so we know that we need to be working with all of our students to individualize their learning plan, to really look at what their needs are and focus supports and resources to target their needs, their individual needs, and making sure that they're successful in that least restrictive environment. But we also know that sometimes that is difficult, and sometimes that still is limited based on the lack of resources and support if it's a behavior issue. So if the behaviors and that piece is not addressed, and I'm going to bring in the topic of mental health again because I feel very passionate about that. Our kids that are experiencing trauma, they absolutely need support in that area. And we just don't have enough support, enough resources. And those types of resources particularly cost a lot of additional money. We know that there's a lot of different organizations and interagency work and efforts that are being directed to support mental health. But I will tell you, in the Antelope Valley, in Lancaster, where I live, there's not enough spots to serve the number of kids that we have that need that type of support. And we work every day with several agencies, and there are not enough social workers, there are not enough providers to help all of the families that need that support, and to help all of the children that need that support. So when we talk about some of the real challenges, disproportionality is not one that we can ignore. It is real. We see it every day where I am. And if you walk into the other piece that's here, or that's not here, that needs to be discussed, is we walk into our special ed classes, and many times the special ed class is filled with children of color. Even though, and it's very disproportionately reflective of who we serve in the district as a whole. In addition to that, when we walk into your alternative ed classes, your community day schools, you see the population that oftentimes mirrors your special education classes. Again, showing significant disproportionality. Here, African American children are identified as having intellectual disabilities and emotional disturbances at rates greater than Caucasian counterparts. More minority children continue to be served in special education than would be expected from the percentage of minority students in the general population. And then studies support that schools with predominantly Caucasian students and teachers have placed disproportionality high numbers in minority students in special education programs. This suggests that we would benefit our staff, our adults in our system, and many of them have been in the system a long time, but our demographics and our population continues to change every year. So if you look at longitudinal data, you will see that the students, the demographics of the students that we serve, the face of the students that we serve, especially in the state of California, has definitely shifted. We serve more students of color now than we have ever served in the past, and that number will continue to grow. So if we're not ready and open to building those relationships, continuing to have set high expectations and supporting all students in their capacity to reach those expectations at an accelerated rate. And we heard Brian this morning, it's not about incremental improvement. It has to be about accelerated improvement. Otherwise, we will always have large groups of students that are significantly behind. So how do we do that? We see the impact in the graduation gap, and 64% special ed graduated high school compared to a significantly higher number of all students, and then the dropout rate. So I would encourage you to flip that around. Is it okay for us to say only 35%? 35% is okay for us to leave 35% behind. So if we sit 100 kids up here, which 35 would you pick to leave behind? That's not okay. Or which 15%, which would you pick to drop out? So we know when we think about the school to prison pipeline, where do those students end up? Approximately 72% of students that don't graduate or drop out end up being arrested or incarcerated within 5 years. Is that a number? Is that a child, an outcome that we're willing to live with? When we think about real challenges, we've talked a lot about funding, but it is a real issue that we have to balance and we have to deal with. Because we do, California as a state, when you talk about LCFF and base funding dollars, and you compare California as a state to the levels of funding that, per pupil funding that other school districts in other states are receiving, we know that California is down, way down in the 40, we're down at the 46, 49 area. So we're nowhere near where many other states are as far as their per pupil funding. But when we have to take some of those base dollars and then we're utilizing them to help to supplement and provide services and resources to students that need these services and resources. There's no argument that we want and those students need the absolute best. It's trying to balance all of the competing commitments, obligations, and needs for everyone else. We know, we've heard data this morning earlier, we know where our African American students are performing. We know where our English language learners are performing. We know where our special ed students are performing. So when you start talking about equity, how do you take that dollar and divide it in an equitable way to ensure that all students are going to meet the needs and meet the levels of performance that they need to be successful and to compete? Again, as we think about it in terms of if it were our child, would we be willing to allow our child to be set aside? When we think about college ready, career ready, and both, and we think about the challenges that we face, whether it's a special ed child, a child of color, English language learner, our Caucasian students, our low socioeconomic students, doesn't every child deserve an education that at the end of that journey is going to ensure that they are both college and career ready? Doesn't every child deserve that option? That's one of that's the vision for our district, and that was one of the things that I kind of, as superintendent, sometimes you get to navigate things in the direction you want. And one of the things that I have always believed strongly in is that every child deserves to have options. And the only way that we're going to get to the point where they have options about what they want to do with their life is to ensure that we have excellence in our program and support for each and every one of them to be successful. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we believe and can we do it? And I say yes, we can do it. We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do that, and whether or not we do it, must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't so far. This is not a new statement. This is a quote from back in the 60s from Ronald Edmonds. I was alive then, I know. But we do know so much. So how do we align our resources? How do we align our commitment? How do we bring voice to our expectations and our needs so that we accomplish the most important work? Because if we fail our youth, we fail ourselves. I would say we can and we must rethink special and general education policies, programs, and practices, because it's not just about special education in isolation by itself. It's about the entire educational system. We have to take a systems approach, and we have to look at what's happening, starting with general ed, when our kids come into our system, bless you, when our children come into our system, and how we support them and how we respond when they're not learning. How we respond when they need to be taught appropriate behaviors. Because if those behaviors are getting in the way of their learning, how do we respond? If the response is sending them out of the class all the time, then we are going to get exactly what we're putting in. If the response is a distraction where they're not being taught, then we're going to get exactly what we're putting in. We need to make sure that we're training and supporting our general ed teachers so that they are capable, they have the capacity and the comfort, they have the tools in their chest for those effective strategies to respond when there are inappropriate behaviors. Greater emphasis on utilization of differentiation strategies, because it is not one size fits all, especially with education. Our kids are coming with different experiences, different background knowledge, different needs, and different directions. So as we think about the support that they need, we have to look at each one individually. And most importantly, build those relationships and recognize that we are, especially in my district, we are often reminded of the trauma that our kids are bringing into the classroom each and every day. And when I talk about trauma, I'm not talking about they themselves are physically shaken. Trauma looks very different. We in here have all experienced trauma, and many are going through trauma today. But children experience, they're young, they're youthful. Their little minds aren't capable all the time of navigating and managing the information and what's happening in the world around them. So it can be divorce, it can be being taken out of your home. What would that feel like? They're not going to be focused on their homework tonight. It can be a car accident. It can be what's going on. They witnessed, and this is not far-fetched, they witnessed some kind of murder, or someone is incarcerated. They have to move unexpectedly. They're homeless. They find themselves in a homeless situation. There are all types of things that our kids are dealing with each and every day. And then lastly, I would like to share some other thoughts promoting co-teaching and inclusion models, and I'm sure my colleagues will be talking more about that. But moving away from thinking about special education in isolation, where we take children that are struggling and they become someone else's work. All our kids, all our work. Focus on early childhood education. We need to make sure we start early, and policies and practices that honor equity and access to ensure that students are getting what they need. All students are getting what they need, and that we have funding, adequate and equitable funding to ensure that. So thank you very much.